Hey everybody, Eddie Babbage here, founder, CEO of Timeline Genius, your host of the Wedding Industry Insider podcast. I've got a really special episode lined up for you today. We're going to go a little off the beaten path, but I think it's going to be amazing and fresh and very interesting to everybody listening. I have with me here my partner in crime, Brooke Bowenschulte. Brooke, she works with Timeline Genius. I'm going to let you give a more proper introduction here in a minute, but first, I just want to tell everybody a little bit more about what I was alluding to when I said we're going to go off the beaten path. So you, as you very often do on our team, had the brilliant idea. You're like, Eddie, you're talking to people that use Timeline Genius and hearing like, oh, I love the podcast, but no matter how many episodes they've heard, they may not really have an understanding of Timeline Genius. So Brooke, you had the great idea that kind of led to this episode, which is, wait, let's just take a pause and do a dedicated episode to give people a real behind the scenes, deeper look at Timeline Genius, the soul, the spirit of the company, features, benefits, just really to give people a sense for what Timeline Genius is. So
Yeah.
that's what we're going to do in this episode.
Nice.
Even if you've used Timeline Genius for years, I promise you're going to learn something new. You will leave here with a deeper perspective. And obviously, if you've never used Timeline Genius, you're going to hear some things here that I think will really be enlightening and eye-opening. But before we get into all of that, Brooke, will you just tell folks, I know some people listening already know you, but for those who don't, will you just tell them a little about your background and how it is that you got to be where you are with our
Yeah.
company?
Awesome. So, hello, I am Brooke. I have been in the wedding industry. I've been a wedding industry professional since about 2014. I graduated with a degree in hospitality, like many of us. And honestly, I've just been working so many different jobs in the industry since then. To give you a little bit of a background so you kind of know where my experience lies, I started as a corporate event assistant. Then I was the event coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. Then I went on to manage a venue, and ultimately I became the sales director of a rental company here in Kansas City. We did hundreds and hundreds of events every weekend. It was awesome. A very big learning experience. And then in 2020, I became certified with the Certified Wedding Planner Society, and I was introduced to Timeline Genius. And I had been planning weddings for friends, families, acquaintances, and everybody for years while I had these other jobs. So I got certified. I then saw TG, subscribed to Timeline Genius. A few months later, when COVID was happening, I thought I was going to lose my job just because they laid everyone else off. I came across Upwork. Many of you might have heard of that. I wanted to be a VA, have a little bit of extra money to just make sure if I lost my job, I had something to do. I applied for a job, had no idea where I was applying. It was just a wedding industry role. And a few minutes later, I get a call from Eddie, and he's letting me know that he had already filled the position, but he was so shocked to see that I used Timeline Genius and it was on my resume. And so ultimately, after a few conversations, we went back and forth, and it was decided that I would come on and Eddie would train me on all things TG. So what started as 5 hours a week has turned into me being here pretty much full time all the time. And I have loved it. And I've just loved being here to basically help Eddie and the team create what TG is today, and just kind of being along for the ride with what the future of TG is going to be. So that's a little bit about me and how I got here.
I love it, Brooke. And you and I have talked, and we did a previous podcast
Yep.
episode, me and Savannah, and it was great. I encourage people to still check that out. But I say this a lot. I think over the years, there are a lot of times that I get credit that's not really just due to me because, as you just said, I mean, we have this amazing team,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that I mean, without getting spiritual or religious or anything, like we have these intentions, we have these dreams, but none of us can do it alone. And for me, like when I look back over the course of TG, for you and other people on the team, but, definitely for you, it's like, wow, like I never would have been able to do this without you, and
Oh,
like I think God or the universe or whatever we want to think, fate, whatever, like can bring people into each other's lives at the right time and in the right way. I mean, we don't have to go deep down the rabbit hole, and we've talked about this but it's really weird how it shook out. Like
Oh
that,
yeah.
you and I connected, and you mentioned Tom. Like it's just like, really, is it all accidental? I don't know. Anyway,
No, I
um,
agree.
it's really just been amazing having you on board, and I think that I just to kind of set the stage, want to just take that opportunity to put you on a pedestal and let everybody know if you enjoy Timeline Genius, and you very much have Brooke to thank for so much, like from features to ideas about how we market, ideas about how we support our systems. Like your DNA is all over this company, and that's a fact. So,
Love that.
um, yeah, well, that's just a fact. I think here, Brooke, so I wanted to kind of introduce you, and I'll tell people here, I'm going to do a little more talking, maybe then. This will be a little bit more of a collaboration, even though I still am interviewing you.
Yep.
Um, and you, in classic Brooke fashion, you had all the ideas, so we've got notes for here for kind of, but I know this is going to also be organic. I think I want to start things off, Brooke, by just telling people the origin story of Timeline Genius.
Yep.
For those that haven't heard, the way our company started, I think this will give context for everything that Brooke and I are going to be talking about here on this episode. Again, to make you very informed about Timeline Genius, and you got to understand where it came from. Okay, so back in 2013, I was looking for a new project. I had built two prior tech companies, and I was just looking for the next opportunity. And there's one very deep message that's been seared into my brain, heart, and soul when it comes to business. And it is that it's all about finding a way to serve others. Now, I know that may sound trite, but for me, it's just the gospel truth. And what I mean by that is, if you don't have something in this world that's really helping people, then you just don't have much at all. And it just, for me, like the way to solve those problems is like with technology. For other people, it may be through other means. But I went looking, and my wife did all the, the planning for our wedding, which is kind of funny. I did nothing for my wedding other than playing the music and the booze. And my wife saw me looking at all of these different industries. Her name is Brooke too, which is weird.
Yes. It
Um,
is.
spelled with
It
an
can
E
be a
too,
little confusing.
which is weird. But that's a whole separate thing. Um, so I went looking for a problem. And my wife said, you should talk to wedding planners because planning our wedding was so stressful. So I started talking to dozens, eventually hundreds of planners over a course of months and years. I was like, what is the most tedious, time consuming, painful, whatever part of your job? And hearing over and over, planners would say, Eddie, the timeline, like it's not, even planners that enjoyed it. And there were a few out there that were like, I like it. But even those people were like, there has to be a faster way, right? Like, because they're spending and, they're putting all of this detail in there, and they're spending 10, 15 hours start to finish, making edits, sending out emails, collaborating, talking about the timeline, all of this stuff. And once I saw that there was this real dire need for timelines, I was like, okay, well, wow. Once I understood where the obstacles to efficiency were and stuff, I was like, okay, well, we can build a software to address that. So rather than me just kind of rattling on here, Brooke, I want to rope you in, because what you bring to the table that I will never bring is, you're a certified wedding planner. You not only do you know the software inside out, you're also a certified wedding planner. From your perspective, can we maybe just take a pause before we get into features and benefits, and just kind of get your 2 cents on, from your vantage point, what is the value and importance of the wedding day timeline to you?
Gosh, it's
Or in
everything.
your
Yeah, it really is everything because no matter what, everything that you've planned leading up to that event day, if the event day isn't executed properly, that's what they are going to remember. So no matter how organized you were and how well your admin side is, if the day is not executed properly, and that's not to say that things won't go wrong, but if things are like not executed properly like planned, that is what they will remember. And so the timeline is such it is such a vital part of the entire process. And I always think about it from, if you're working in a corporate setting and you're doing a huge project, you're going to have an outline and you're going to have all of these steps and check boxes and all of that. And so when it comes to a wedding, even though this is a party that we're throwing, it needs and it is treated like, it's a business, and there are steps and check boxes and all of that to make sure we're executing that final result properly. The best example that I have is a few years ago, I was doing my own type of events, and a planner in town got very sick, well, with COVID, but she was very sick and could not execute her wedding for that weekend. And
Mm.
she called me. I remember calling Eddie and being like, oh my goodness, I have to log out because I need to go work a wedding.
Hmm.
And the wedding went off with no issues. It went great. And I'm not saying that to, brag on myself. The reason that it went so well was that this planner had a phenomenal timeline. And I was able to just walk right in on Thursday, execute the rehearsal, get through everything. Obviously, it was nice that I had some background knowledge of the industry and I do this for a living, but that is the expectation that you should have of your timelines when you create them. But also, that is why they are so important, is that needs to be able to execute a phenomenal event, but also just in case you are incapacitated and cannot attend or plan that event on the day of, you need to know that whoever takes over has all the tools in that timeline as possible. So yeah, that's my
I love
example.
that. It's funny, Brooke, you actually lived the thing that people kind of just toss out, which
Oh
is
yeah.
like, when I talk to a lot of successful planners, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. I'm sure you have too. They say, Eddie, there's so much detail in my timelines that if I got hit by a bus, knock on wood, I
Yep.
always say, nobody go get hit by a bus. But they're like, if I got hit by a bus, somebody else could literally take my timeline and run an A plus event. And that happened. Like you
Oh
saw
yeah.
it in action. That's
Oh yeah.
amazing.
It was
That's amazing.
wild. At the end, it felt very cool to witness, and it was even cool that like I at that time was on the TG team. So
Yeah.
I actually now have like this real experience. When I get on calls with planners, that's one of my favorite things. I joke all the time, like Eddie could totally tell me, like, Brooke, go grab an intern, go get someone who's brand new to the company, teach them Timeline Genius, let them do the demos. But ultimately, what we've realized is one, I love doing them. And the main
Yeah.
reason is I'm able to talk to planners, dig into my experience, grab a real life example of something that happened on a wedding I was working and why I set up my timeline that way. And it has just made the overall experience of sharing Timeline Genius with planners so much better because I actually can say, like, this happened to me. Maybe one day he'll make me give it up. But as of right now, it really is so fun talking to planners and just being like, no, this is really what happened. And this is why TG is able to produce timelines that can be, handed off if needed and all of that. So,
I can't make you give it up, Brooke, because we literally just got a message from somebody saying they were in tears with
yeah.
joy and relief by the end of a call with you, which we're going to plug that later. Like, just so you guys know, if there's one takeaway here, and we'll mention this again, I'm kind of just going organically here. Honestly, just get on a call with Brooke. Like, seriously, I mean, literally got a an email from somebody saying that, like, and you talked to her for like 2 hours. I probably shouldn't even tell, but we're just being transparent here. Like, and you can only do that when you're coming from a place of passion. Like, you have that passion because you are a planner.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. What I'm going to do here, Brooke, is I'm going to well, first of all, let me just go ahead. We're going to come back to this, and I think we had kind of planned to do this at the end, but I don't want to bury the lead here. Go ahead, just on a side note, and tell people how can they get in touch with you if they want to get on your calendar. In case somebody like gets distracted, I don't want them to miss what I think is probably the single most important takeaway from this, which is talk to Brooke so you can see what Timeline Jesus does, get to know her, let her look at your business. How can people get on your calendar if they want to,
Yep.
Brooke?
The easiest way is at timelinegenius.com. There is a button that you can click at the top, and it's going to say sign up for a demo. And you can sign up for a demo with me, or it either says that or a call.
Yeah,
But
it says, it says under, like on the timelinegenius.com homepage, it says product, and then you select product and then schedule a personal tour, and that'll get you right to the calendar. Yeah.
Yes. So, and it is a personal tour. It's one on one. On that call, I'm going to get to know you. I'm going to get to know your business. And as I give you a tour, I really like to focus on the things that your company needs to be successful. I have talked to thousands of planners. I swear it's thousands at this point. I've talked to planners in the middle of the night in Hong Kong, in Mexico, I'm in Kansas. So in Kansas, I've talked to people in California, New York. And what I've learned is everyone does weddings a little bit differently. So we get on, I learn about you, I learn about your business, and we walk through TG to see if it's a good fit. Best thing about the site is it sells itself. This is not a salesy call. By the end, you're going to know if it's a good fit for you. And of
Sure.
course, I'll at the end share with you, the subscriptions, and I'll give you my bonus or my promo code so that you can always get a discount. But it really is not a call where you feel like you're like, don't worry that you're going to get on and I'm going to try and sell you something. The goal here is to find out, is it a good fit for you? And I'm sure I can get testimonials from plenty of people that say by the end of it, they really just feel so much more comfortable. One of the number one things people say is they'll at the end of the call, they'll say, I just feel like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. It does, like, yes, you could probably teach yourself how to use the site, but why, when you could get on a call with me for an hour and we could teach you really quickly. So yes, please go there, and you can sign up for a call. Now, another way, if you're driving right now and you're not able to go look that up, Brooke at timelinegenius.com is where you can reach me. It's my email. And then, of course, if none of those work, just DM us on Instagram, find our support email. You will be able to get a hold of me if you just say, hey, I want to do a demo with Brooke. One of our team members will find me for you for sure.
And I'm going to come back and just tell people like a little bit more. I mean, first of all, I don't know any other software companies that are doing what we're doing. Like you have like experience, like the expertise, the know-how for the software, and we're literally just like, you can talk to Brooke for free. Like, I don't know that we'll always be able to sustain that, honestly, but for now, we're literally offering your very valuable time and expertise as the intersected, like, planning, our software, and you're just a free resource right now for people that want to get smarter on, even if they don't use the platform, you're going to leave so much more knowledgeable about this very important tool that is impacting our industry, regardless of whether or not, and I'm not saying that from a place of ego, just factually, like Timeline Genius at this point is part of the WED tech landscape. Like, you should know how this tool works. Even if you don't know it, hey, at least you know what your other people in your market are using. Like, talking to you is such a no-brainer investment of time. I'm going to come back a little bit more to that. What I want to do first, and I'm also going to leverage the fact, Brooke, that you have the vantage point of a planner here. Before I do that, though, and I couldn't resist that little kind of digression, I feel like we put the cart a little in front of the horse. Let me just tell people very sort of succinctly, straight from the heart, here's the problem and the solution. Okay. Like, here's why Timeline Genius exists. Okay. When I was talking to all these planners back in 2013, and the fundamental dynamic hasn't changed. Okay. There's this incredibly important document that you just spoke to, which is the wedding day timeline. Not just important for you as the planner, though obviously it is. People are making assessments about you and your level of professionalism, things they may not even be saying, but when they see that timeline that you send out, that's very much an indication of the quality of your work, right? Mm-hmm. So, but also all of the vendors that you're working with, your clients, the venues, like, this is a vitally important document to keep everybody on the same page, to have that shared written A+ game plan to pull off the A+ event, all working together in harmony, right? The issue is, if you're approaching timelines the way that you and I just talked about, Brooke, where you're putting all of that detail in, it becomes time consuming because there's no two weddings that are ever the same. Planners that I talked to before Timeline Genius was built, they're like, Eddie, I have a template that I've built up over the years. But you never will have a generic template that's perfect. By definition, it's generic. It's not tailored for each event, right? And then when you get into the editing phase, and you inevitably have to edit this template because it's not perfectly made for this actual wedding that you're doing, you're moving things around and you're losing time. And then you've got to collaborate and you're emailing it out as an attachment to like 15 people. And you're getting feedback from the photographer in one email thread and the client. And then you're getting text about it. And the
Yep.
communication is all scattered around. And then you've got to execute it and you're taking it on a clipboard with you. And then you're losing your clipboard and not knowing like Timeline Genius solves all of that,
Yep.
right? Like what we do is we take the pain and hassle out of creating this vitally important document and we do it in four succinct stages. First of all, when you start your timeline, we have a genius feature. There's no other software on planet Earth that does this. You can put in the key information for the wedding, the religious tradition, how long you have the photographer booked, how many people are getting hair and makeup. And then there's this really powerful AI that we built. It took 11 years, but we did it, that takes all that info and constructs the initial timeline for you. Or if you want to work off your own templates, Timeline Genius lets you create your own template and then repurpose that automatically to start your timelines. Then you're in the edit stage. Editing in Google Docs and other software, it's slow, it's tedious. I love to show the example of like you change a time in a Google Doc or a Google Sheet or whatever other tool by 20 minutes, and you got to go painstakingly adjusting every other item. In Timeline Genius, that's 2 or 3 seconds. You can click a button and instantly get tailored timelines for other people. So the editing process is streamlined. The collaboration piece, you're not just emailing out PDFs or Word docs to people. You invite them to a real-time mobile-friendly version of the software. You look great because if you need to hide an item from the bride because it's a surprise, you can do that. If you want to make the wedding party contact section editable for somebody, you can do that. And then when it's all said and done, you download this beautiful PDF that has your logo, it's branded. You've saved on average from our customer research about 65% of the time that you used to spend. Some people save more than that, substantially more. Just think about that, people. If you're listening, if
Yep.
you're doing 20 events a year and spending 10 hours on average, that's 200 hours of your time going into timelines. What is it worth to you to
Mm-hmm.
cut that down by 65%? So that in the last piece, I guess, is the execution piece. We actually rolled out about a year and a half ago a whole feature set that allows you to pull out Timeline Genius. It's totally mobile friendly, any
Mm-hmm.
kind of smartphone or tablet, and to pull out the execute view on the game day. If you want to ditch your clipboard, you can do that. You want to shift things by 10 minutes and then send out a text update to tell everybody, hey, I shifted the timeline by 10 minutes, that you can see if they confirm they got the update. So again, it's saving time. It's saving your sanity because it makes it a lot less stressful. You're less likely to make errors. And it's helping you put forth a higher level of professionalism. So I wanted to just get all of that in there, Brooke, so people know just high level what's the problem? Creating timelines and spending a lot of hours and feeling stressed while I'm doing it. You go from that, the transformation that we see when people use Timeline Genius is you go from that to like, I don't even dread when a timeline's coming up. Like I do it and I just sit down, carve out an hour and zip through the Genius feature, move things around, and boom, I'm going. So
Yep.
having said all of that, and I know that's a lot, but again, I just kind of wanted to get that core out there for people. First, let me just kind of take a pause, catch my breath, and let you speak from your vantage point,
Yeah.
Brooke. Again, bringing that perspective of a planner. How do you sort of see the problem solution and also maybe some of the key benefits that maybe I didn't even speak to in your
Yeah.
view?
So, one of the biggest things that we talk about a lot when I get on calls with people, I'll have people get on and they're like, well, I've been using the same timeline for 10 years and it works great. And I believe them. And I have no doubt when I get on a call that every planner I'm talking to knows how to create a timeline. Most of them do. Some actually are brand new and they're honest about that from the start, and we help them. But most know how to create a timeline. But what they don't realize is all of the little tiny nitty gritty things that they are doing along the way that just don't need to be taking up time. And they could be doing so many other things or adding more cool things or making their timelines look more professional. But instead, they're over there manually editing every single timeline item, or they're going in there and they're, having to go back and forth in email with PDFs and downloads and all this stuff when Timeline Genius, the reason we have a lot of these cool tools is it's to streamline and make your processes easier. And one of the biggest things that I see from my perspective about TG is it's not just about you as the planner. The
Mm,
experience that your vendors and the venues are going to have when you invite them to look at a timeline or the final product you're going to give them. And then also for your clients, the experience that they're going to have is very professional, and it's that modern, I don't want to say modern millennial, but honestly, it is millennial and Gen Z expectation of, I want, they don't want us to print off a piece of paper or send them a fax. That's what it feels like sometimes. Or just send them over a PDF and tell them to write notes on it and then somehow send it back. What they want is send them a form and have them fill it out and it all be digital. They can do it on their phone. They can do it on their laptop. They can do it wherever they need to. Those are the things that I notice about TG, where yes, it has, all the timeline capabilities, of course, but there's so many more layers to it. And one of the big ones is the experience for all parties. And that's one reason I love it for my business, especially because I get feedback from my clients all the time. I definitely get feedback from vendors when they're like, oh my goodness, what is actually, you and I got an email yesterday, Eddie. And the response, it said, it was from a photographer and it went to one of our planners and it said, oh my gosh, this is the best and most convenient software I've ever seen. I love it.
wow.
So, like I said, the experience for everybody, not even just me as the planner, is a really good experience when you move over to this.
I'm gonna, again, I'm just in. I love everything you said, Brooke. Obviously, like, yeah, completely everything you said, 100%. And kind of in the spirit of this sort of unscripted sort of podcast episode, I'm just gonna be transparent here and say something too, which is we have a lot of different people that use Timeline Genius at
Mm-hmm.
this point. We have venues, we have photographers,
Yep.
obviously, we have wedding planners, we have a whole range of people, DJs, etc. I just want to take a minute to say, and I've if people have been a student of this podcast, they know we talk about the business side of things, and I've had a number of marketing experts on here, and we talk about something that I've learned in business, building three companies, having an ideal client, okay,
Mm-hmm.
knowing who that person is. And sometimes it takes courage to say, no, this is who I'm for. And I want to tell people right now who we're for. And I do this knowing that some of you listening may not be that person. I don't want to turn you off. You should still get on a call with Brooke. You should
Oh
still
yeah.
check out Timeline Genius. But I want to tell you about our avatar, Wendy Wedding Planner. Okay.
Yep.
This is internal. All right. Like, this is like behind the curtain, y'all.
They
I'm
know about
saying,
Wendy now.
I want you all to know if you fit the description that I'm about to share, do not pass go. Do just stop what you're doing, like old school Vanilla Ice, stop, collaborate, and listen, whatever the reference is. Like, stop in your tracks and immediately email Brooke at Timeline Genius if this is you. Okay, if you are a serious wedding planner, okay, and I'm not denigrating, don't want to step on any toes. I love my hobbyists. I love the people that are just getting into this business, and it's beautiful to watch them grow. And they're like, Eddie, I've got 3 events right now, but we're growing, or I've got a full time job and I'm doing this on the side and I'm growing. Great, love you, sending you a hug. We're here for you too. But I want you to know if wedding planning is your full time profession,
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing, say, 15, 20 plus events a year, okay, and you're somebody who knows, you're like, I've got revenue coming in. This is my life, Eddie. Wedding planning is what I do in this world. This is my profession. This is my love. This is how I feed myself and my family. And if you can show me a way, Eddie, that I can save some time and put forth a higher level of professionalism,
Yep.
I'm in, right? I'm not talking about the people that are like, well, yeah, I don't want to spend any money on this because this is like my hobby. Like, okay, that's cool. We might still work with you. Don't get me wrong. We've got people like that, right?
Yeah, we do.
Like, Fury is kicking in. But like, if you are a full time wedding planner and you're doing 15, 20 plus events a year, do not pass go. And I'm going to tell y'all why I'm saying this. This is like, we know we've been doing this for years. Brooke's been at it with me for years. I don't know where the time goes, but it's flying. And Brooke, you said it. You're like, I've talked to thousands of planners. We have. Maybe not all the time one on one, but over the scale of it, I mean, if you add up the live events, what I'm saying here is we see the pattern. Okay, like you won't be the first full-time serious legit planner to come to us. We've seen it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and I can tell you how the story goes when you come to us and you've been doing your timelines a certain way and you're like, Eddie, all my vendors love my timelines already. Good, you're exactly who we like to work with.
Yep.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
when you get ramped up on timeline GS, at first you're going to be like, well, do I have the time to learn a software? Yeah, you do, because it's really easy.
Yeah,
You
it
don't
is.
have the time not to learn it. You're
Yeah.
too busy because you're running a legit business, a legit wedding planning business, and it takes time. You can't afford not to save the hours that Timeline Genius is going to save you. And when you get to the other end, after you've done just a couple timelines, you're going to say, how in the world was I ever doing this without it? All the things that you were doing before, it's so customizable. I just wanted to take a minute to say, if that's you, if you're a full time planner, you're serious about what you're doing more than just a few events a year, please, 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 like my man James Brown said, please, please, like for your own benefit, for your family, for your peace of mind and your business, email Brooke at timelinegenius.com. Brooke, how do you, because you see the transformation at this
Oh yeah.
point more than I do, because you talk to people when they're getting on board. Can you speak just honestly and candidly about like, what is that transformation that you see when like wedding planners come to us and
Oh
like they
yeah.
take the plunge and get onboarded?
It's always rewarding when I get on a call and I'm talking to a planner who sometimes and this just happens, we're all human, they'll get on and you can just tell they're apprehensive. They're like, it's like you can tell they're busy and they don't have time for this, but they've signed up because there's that something in them that's like, maybe this will work. And they get on and they have more questions than they are listening because they're just like, well, why can't it do this? Why can't it do that? But there's something so rewarding about when we start that call and about one third way through, I can just see the light bulbs go off and I can see their wheels turning. And I realize that they are just so busy and their process does work. And, why change something that works? But when they start, that individual is smart, they're business minded, their wheels start turning as they're listening to me. And I'm saying, we can cut down the time on this. You no longer need to be doing this because the system already does this. You don't have to think through this because the system will generate that for you. When I start showing all those things, their wheels are turning to where they're like, oh my goodness, like it is exactly how I do it. It just, I'm not the one having to sit there at 11 p.m. at night editing this timeline because it doesn't take that long anymore. The system's doing it, in a sense for me, cutting back on a lot of that time. The biggest thing that I notice kind of on this transformation is in the call, people will be like, I don't want to change this. I don't want to change that. I don't want to change this. And then they'll sign up and I'll check in with them a month, 2 months later. And a lot of the little tiny nitty gritty things that they didn't necessarily love because it didn't fit their normal plan, they don't even care about anymore because all of the tools that have been proven to truly work are working for them. And so, yes, there's a little bit of change that goes into it. And sometimes you have to adapt to a little bit different. Maybe the cover page looks different, or maybe the bullet points are a little bit different. But at the end of the day, after those calls, when I can tell it's someone who's just a little nervous about change, when I check in on them and they're just blown away because they're like, okay, I get what you were saying. Like, it's so worth it. That is so cool for me. And honestly, it reminds me too that like, for any business, and it's not just in the wedding industry, change and software updates and all of that is always so hard. But what you get out of it, if you just take the 10 minutes or the hour or whatever to learn and just see if it's a good fit, can truly change your game, like change the game for your business. So that's what I see a lot in the transformation part.
I love that, Brooke. You know, it's funny as you were talking. It's so true, and this applies to all of us. When I was in high school, my English teacher, there was a quote that she just adored, and she just like stuck it in my brain so much so that like now, like 30 some odd years later, I still remember it. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds." I'm not calling anybody little, and I'm calling myself out. What he means is like you get stuck on a certain thing and you just like, this is the way I do this is the way I've always done it, and this is the right way. And there's a cognitive bias for that, right? Like there's literally like a documented cognitive bias for us to prefer the familiar rather than the things that may be actually better but that are new. And I think a lot of what we see, like I preach that so often, again, coming from the vantage point of a tech entrepreneur and just like an entrepreneur, period, which most people listening to us, if you're a wedding planner, you've got a wedding planning business, you're an entrepreneur. You're not just a wedding planner.
Right.
Like
Right.
you do wedding planning, but you also run a business. And as a business owner, entrepreneur, you have to be relentlessly committed to being open minded and to looking always for the best, fastest,
Yes.
optimal way to do things. And I think there's almost a fear, Brooke, that I
Mhm.
hear in people. There are a few sort of things. One sort of fear I hear is like, I've been doing it a certain way and like it works and I'm scared to try something different. Like, how do you kind of see that sort of fear, and how do you see people move through it, and where do you see them get to on the other side of that? Like, am I going to be boxed in? But all my vendors already like what I'm doing. So like, how do you kind of think about that from your vantage point?
So actually do see that, and I get it because just anything in my life, like change is hard. But one thing that I notice is sometimes it doesn't come down to what you, as the business owner, are comfortable with. I think a lot of us learned this in the past couple of years. One of the biggest is especially in this industry, you do have to kind of meet where other people are meeting. And what you started doing 20 years ago that's been working for you 20 years ago is not the expectation that a bride or a groom, or just an event client has nowadays. They have expectations that are, when they book you, it's easy to sign documents and it's easy to send back and forth planning material and it's easy to get your timeline and be able to look at it and they can actually envision their day. A lot of what we did, I mean, in this industry 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, is great and it did work. But the expectation of, and I'll say it's not all, these are not all brides, but just as an example, the expectation of the Gen Z and the millennial bride is more modern tools and more kind of meeting on the playing field that we're all on. And that's just a part of it. And yes, like sometimes that's really hard as a business owner, but if you want to continue to grow and you want to continue to book clients, and maybe you aren't wanting to book Gen Z clients and stuff, that's fine. But for the majority, that's just the marriage age. You really do have to meet where the expectation of the client is. And that's one thing that is, to kind of loop it back to TG. One thing that's super cool is when I go to send a timeline to, or well, when I go to start a timeline nowadays, I used to just email them and say, hey, send me a list of your vendors. Well, my bride would be like, do you want like their phone number? Do you want their email? Do you need their address? What do you need? And then it would be like, oh, well, just send me this. And that now it's a back and forth. With TG, we say just send them over the client input form. It's going to tell them exactly what you need. It's going to list out, hey, I need your name, the groom's name, I need the event date, I need to know all your vendors. And luckily, if they're already in your Rolodex, you just click right on them. They don't have to worry about filling in the info, but they can. And so I share that example because it's the expectation of the client. I, as a consumer too, like if someone says to me, send me your vendors, I'm going to be like, well, how? And TG cuts that out. Now it's just, hey, here's the exact form you're going to fill out for me. Thanks. Talk soon. And there goes all the back and forth and all of that. So, yeah, that's just one good example.
I was just thinking, and I don't want this to sound wrong or confrontational to people, but as you were talking, Brooke, I was just thinking about, because I know you've heard that so many times, just like I have, where people are
Yep.
like, my way works.
Yeah. Oh,
In
yeah.
fact, my vendors tell me that I've heard that so many times, and I've seen so many times people kind of go from that to like, thank God, like I opened my mind here, I gave this a try, because now, I mean, I've seen it more times than I can count. And the thought that occurred to me is, I remember a time, and my old school Timeline Genius users who remember like the very first like 2015 version of Timeline Genius, I remember a time
Okay.
when it was much less robust than it is now. And so many of the features and bells and whistles and polished points that are in here now weren't there. And that was a different time. And thank God we had people that like got in there early and said, Eddie, this is great. Here's how to make it better. Where we are now, I just want to kind of shore up a little trust because I get it. Your timelines are so important.
Mm-hmm.
There's a leap of faith. I
Oh yeah.
honestly really appreciate anybody. It's like they put their arms on the chest, they lean back into our gracious arms, and they're like, please catch me, TG. I'm going to try this timeline. Like, I get it, right? What I want to tell you to let you know that the arms are not only there, but they're solid as all get up is just think for a minute about the fact that today, like, during busy season, we'll have over 100,000 timeline items created on our site. Like all these planners that are using the software now are not being silly. They're not doing like something bad. Like we have like people like Lori Hartwell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lori is just amazing. She runs a
Right.
certain CWP society. Lori will tell you, I mean, first of all, Lori's only going to shoot people straight. She's like,
Oh
she'll
yeah.
tell you what she likes and she will tell you what she doesn't like. And she will tell you, just like Timeline Genius, there's no other reasonable way to be doing your timelines. Terica Skaggs. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've done numerous trainings with Terica. We just did a timeline training with Renee Dallow. We've done timeline trainings with Angela Prophet, with,
Right. Are.
Sean Lowe, with Kristen Banta. I mean, luminaries, like the absolute, just some of the most incredible people in this industry. And they are telling you, timeline genius for your timelines. Like that's where it's at. So I just want people to feel, because I've heard that I can feel that fear sometimes, and I
Oh yeah.
understand it. Like, is this going to work for me? Yeah, it will.
Well, and another thing that I'll plug here, which I may regret, but when it comes to, creating your timeline, if you have one that you've been working on for the past 10 years, and that is the template that you love, the reason you should get on a call with me is we may get on that call, and normally I say, use the Genius feature. It's a genius. It does all the thinking. You and I may get on that call, and you just have so much experience, and you have your timeline, and you really love it. And instead, we're going to create your timeline in Timeline Genius together. We're going to make your timeline in there. I'll teach you how to reuse it over and over again. And maybe one day the Genius feature is a good fit for you. You test it out, and maybe it never is. And maybe you just use it a different way. And so that's why when Eddie says, like, there's many different planners using Timeline Genius, and there's many different ways to use it and stuff. That it is true. We have tons of different people, and there's not one exact way. Everyone doesn't come in and log in and start their timelines the exact same way. Some use templates, some use the Genius feature, and some will create their own business template. So if you're like, no way, I'm not using someone else's template, just know you've got our team here and we can help you create a template. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but really the best way is to get on a call with me, because I'll do it for you. Who wouldn't want that?
I, Honestly, we could charge for those calls. I think it's one of those things. It's like planners tell me all the time. Like the problem selling to couples up front is they don't know just how valuable you as the planner
Right,
are. Like until the wedding is over, at which point they're like, "Oh my God, we could never have done this without you." But like,
right.
it's kind of similar. I feel like people don't know until they get on that call with you just how game changingly awesome that is. And I mean, I use a lot of different software tools. I don't know literally off the top of my head one other tool where I can just spin up a call for free. They're going to get on and be like, "Oh, actually, I'll even help you recreate your template, and like I'll hang out with you for like as long as it takes to get to know your bit." Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
such an amazing business changing offer. And another thing, Brooke, and I want your 2 cents on this. I'm just thinking like, and I really do. It did pain me as we were talking about this brilliant idea. I'm so glad, by the way, that you prompted us to do this episode, even though it's not like our usual. I'm so glad we're doing this. But like
Yes.
I told you when you had the idea, I was like, the one thing that pains me a little is people are listening and they can't see the software. So for
Right.
that, they need to get on a call with you, or they can go to timelinegenius.com, click product, and just watch the demo. That I think will just, I know what happens when wedding planners just see what our software does. And it does pay me a little bit that we can't, so I'm not going to get super down in the weeds on how
No.
everything works. What I do want to speak to or hear your thoughts on is One concern I hear is what we talked about. Well, my way already works.
Yep.
Everybody already likes it. And it's like, that's cool, but there's always room for growth and you got to explore getting better. The
Right.
other thing that I hear sometimes, and I'll bet you hear this sometimes too, is, well, there are other tools that say they have, say, a timeline component,
Mhm.
right? Or I can do a timeline in a Word doc. It's not like I can't do it.
Right.
And I think at a surface level, I could literally throw up a website in 30 minutes and say that it has a timeline tool, but
Mhm.
that's not necessarily indicative of how robust that timeline tool is, say,
Right.
with respect to hours. Like, what do you kind of, and this notion of like, well, I don't want to have more than one software. Like,
Oh.
can you just talk to me a little about like what kind of comes to mind when you're kind of thinking about those understandable sort of ideas and concerns?
Can you tell you struck a chord there? I
Yeah.
hear that all the time. And I get it because I probably would have thought it too when I was just getting started or just like, in the industry in the beginning. So whenever anyone says, like, I already have a software, I'm like, That's great. But like, I have a bank account, but I also have a credit card. Like, when you
Right.
have, name one business that has just one software. I know Google doesn't use just one software. I know every software or every company I've
Oh,
ever
we don't.
worked for, right? We at TV, it takes a lot of softwares even to just run
So many
TV
dozens.
alone. Yeah. And then also the back end of, we have a software for scheduling our calendar. We have a software for paying for our website. There are so many things, but it all makes our job easier. And so with that, whenever I talk to people about it, I'm like, I understand. But at the end of the day, and this is always the hard for like everyone, some people to understand in the beginning. And again, I probably was there too, but you're not paying for it. And yes, you're the one swiping your credit card and all of that, but your clients are paying for it. So if that is your first thought, whenever you're thinking about investing in software, if that is your initial thought that I don't want to pay for more, then you actually need to start before this and you need to go back and you need to explore what your rates are or how you're charging your clients.
Hmm.
With TG,
Hello.
throw out an example, and I'm going to use one of my main ones. I have a promo code I usually offer. When you're listening to this, it may not be active, so don't come for me. But call me if you need one. But it's $379 for our annual. When I look at that and I break it down each month, it makes it about $31.50. And I tell everyone, you can move $31, you can add $31.50 to any client you've booked, and no one's going to bat an eye because the amount that you should be your cost should be enough that just isn't the end of the world. Obviously, you don't have to tell them that this is for TG. They're going to know once they start working with you that they're paying for these solid services. But you're not paying for it. And so when people say, I already have a CRM, well, we're not a CRM. The CRM is what's going to help you with booking the client. It's going to help you with automation and emails and invoicing. And we have incredible friends who have those softwares. And we always just say, stack your deck. So stack your deck of software with solid companies that you can then budget in for the year and makes your life easier. I joke too, $31.50 a month. You cannot go. My husband and I probably can't go to Taco Bell anymore for $31.50. If that tells you how much about how we eat, but I don't think we can. And so if you could just cut out one meal, if that's how you're feeling, if you're like, I can't pay for it, even though, like I said, you shouldn't be, it will save you hours. It'll save you time. And if that's not even what you're interested in, if you want to wow your clients, if you really want them, the best way that you can look at it is when your clients get that first timeline, you want them to be able to look at it, see how organized, see how detailed you are. You want them to be able to envision their day to where they don't have any questions about how flawless this is going to be executed. And so when you send over a TG collaboration link and they're able to collaborate right on it and they get a response right from you right on the timeline. And when you send the final copy and it's organized and it's neat, those are the expectations that they're going to go, we're going to rock this on the day of. My wedding's going to be flawless. And so really that like, I tell people all the time, like, look at the cost. You're not paying for it. Look at the value you get out of it. And just know that at the end of the day, you're never, ever, ever, ever going to find one software that does it all. And if you're trying to, I recommend stop, because no business, no type of career you have is going to have one software that does everything. So that's a
Oh,
long-winded way of saying that,
no,
but that's how I feel.
I love it, Brooke, and I'm so with you. Me, I'm a recovering math major, and just like I go, my brain goes to numbers a lot of
Yeah.
times, and I think about it. Over the years, it just kind of hit me, again, like, let's say, and again, that's why I took the time out there just to talk about who Timeline Genius, like our bullseye dead center, can't miss. I know my wife and her business calls them a champagne client. If you're that serious wedding planner, you're doing 15, 20 plus events a year, then you are the kind of person who's like, I don't mind investing in my company if you show me something that's going to save me time and help me level up. And those, coincidentally, are the very people that realize, because again, it's not like, oh, this is my, my first wedding. Like, they're like, no, I know how to do this. And they are the very people that are putting all of that detail into their timelines and thus pouring that time. So let's just say, for the sake of just easy calculation
Mm-hmm.
here, you do 20 events a year. You spend on average 10 hours, again, not just starting the timeline, but you got to make revisions and
Oh,
phone
yeah.
calls and send it out and track down vendors. Let's say you spend 10 hours start to finish on a timeline and
Mm-hmm.
you do 20 events a year. That's 200 hours of your time. What is an hour of your time worth?
Right.
Let's say $50. I hope more. If it's not, that we can talk. That's a separate. We've done pricing webinars and stuff like that. But to make the math easy, let's say 20 events, 10 hours a pop. That's 200 hours, $50 an hour. That's 10,000. That's with the T, folks. $10,000 of your time
Mm-hmm.
going into timelines. I've talked to planners, and I know you have too, that are doing 30 events a year or that are doing 20 or 15, but they spend 15 hours. Like, the more events you do and the more time you're spending on your timelines,
Mm-hmm.
doing things that make sense. If you're
Right.
using a Google Doc, it's a nice touch. I've talked to really successful, thorough planners like that are like, Eddie, I do my master timeline and then I copy and paste out a version of the timeline just for the cake baker because
Yeah.
that makes me look good, Eddie. Now my cake baker doesn't have to go through my 20-page Bible to find the 4 or 5 items that relate to them, but that takes time. You're doing it for the
Yeah.
photographer, for the cake baker, then you change the master timeline and
There
you
you
got
go.
to do it again for everybody. We automate that. Stop
Yeah.
the madness, y'all. Right? But again, just think about, there's $10,000 worth of your time, maybe more, going into creating timelines. If you chop that figure down by 65%, what's that worth to you? It should be $6,500. We're definitely not charging $6,500 to use Timeline Genius. And I just want people to think about it from that lens of not the wedding planner, even, but the entrepreneur, the
Oh,
business
yeah.
owner, as an investment,
Right.
So,
That's exactly
yeah,
it.
there's no one stop that does it all. Yeah, what were we
And
going to say there, Brooke? Sorry.
it's an investment in obviously your business. And you've heard me so far. I won't repeat myself, but you guys have heard me say, like, it's an investment in your business, in the experience that you're going to have and everyone else. But it's also an investment in your personal life. And I know that sounds like, huh? But the reality is, in this industry, the lines get a little muddy because we work weekends and we take meetings after hours, and there's just things that happen outside of a typical 9 to 5, and they do affect our personal life. I actually, a lot of you know, had a daughter this past year. Eddie and I were chatting before this call because she came
Yep.
home from daycare sick, and
Yep.
it and I need to work, but I've got a daughter, and so it affects your personal life in the way that if you are continuing to spend hours and hours sitting there and just moving a timeline item or updating a timeline on 40 different timelines because you want to do vendor individual ones, but you're doing it in Word, you are losing out on time that you could be spending doing other things. And that can affect your personal life in terms of sometimes you're doing that at 10 p.m. at night and you should be spending time with your family. And, or, even if you work during the day, what else could fill that time where you're not just doing all of this tedious manual entry that, as we all know, especially with AI and all the things that software can do now. Some of it I love, some of it's creepy. But now we all know about like what software is capable of. What can you let the computer do that you don't need to be doing? Even if you love some of those, like I loved editing timelines, but then I'd look at it and I'd be like, I was spending hours doing that. And I also, at that time, had a full time job. I didn't have time for all that. So, when you subscribe to a software like this or something that is going to cut down the amount of time and make things easier for you, you're opening up time in your workday, but you're also opening up time, especially in this industry, for your personal life. And I am very keen on that now, now that I'm a mom, and just kind of see how much time I was spending working after 5 p.m. for years and years and years.
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines, showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
You know what's funny, Brooke? First of all, amen to all of that, as you know. And what's funny is when I started Timeline Genius, it was really to solve that pain point that I talked about before, where people were like, I want to do this more efficiently. So saving the time was like really the paramount thing. And maybe right up there with that, it was like giving some peace of mind, because it's not as tedious. Like I talked to so many planners are like, Eddie, I kind of dread doing my timelines when they come around. I'm procrastinating. Like I wanted to also solve that, where it's like we're saving time, but it also feels easier. So you're not dreading it at all. Like, but over time, what's happened, it's funny because you've always been very vocal about this. Like what's happened has been like for years, it was like, look, Timeline Genius, you can do a timeline in a Word doc and make it amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Timeline Genius just lets you do it more easily. But today, where we are today, I would say we've gone way past that at this point. In other words, you can't do some of the things that Timeline Genius lets you do anywhere else. And the clearest, easiest to point to example of this is text reminders. Like Google Docs will not let you set up text reminders for all the different parties in the wedding. For, hey, I want the ladies to get a text reminder 20 minutes before hair and makeup. And I want the florist to get a text. Like Google doesn't even know what florist is. It's just text in a Google Doc. Okay. We know that's a florist. We got the florist contact number, and you can set so at this point, it's not even just saving the time, though that's always centrally important. I would say right up there with it is it makes it feel easier creating your timelines, and it's letting you do things that you can't do any other way. Why? Because this helps you shine. This is going to make you look good. Think of the impression you're making and the referrals and the accolades and the higher level of review, because now you're using this powerful tech tool that's the only tech tool that I know in the world specifically designed for wedding day timelines. Like we built this for that,
Right.
like, does that
I
land, yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
totally. And I have a quick story just about text reminders as a whole because that is one of the features that when I'm giving a demo, people light up. And it's crazy because I could tell you like 10 features we have where like
Yeah.
I can see the light bulbs go off in people. But text reminders. So one of the biggest things for me is on the day of, I wear an Apple Watch. I also have my phone with me. And that's a whole other story about how I talked Eddie into letting us just make the execute feature so we could use our phone on the day of. But I set up text reminders to go to myself. So when we talk about text reminders, we talk about how you can text the bridal party and you can text other vendors and give them a heads up of, hey, you need to be here at this time and all that. I set text reminders to go to myself all day long as well. And what I love is I always share the same story because I remember it. I was at a church here in Kansas City. I was pinning boutonnieres on the groomsmen, and my watch, it just lit up and it said, text reminder or timeline reminder. And then it
Yeah.
said, line up at the front of the church 10 minutes. And so I'm pinning boutonnieres. I see this go off. Instead of me standing there in that moment, wondering what time is it and what's next and what are we doing, I saw it go off and I said, hey, gentlemen, if you've already been pinned, head to the front of the church. And if you have
Mm.
not, hang out here and we'll get them all done. And then right when that was done, I headed to the front of the church. And I know that sounds so like, duh, that's what you would do. But there are steps that you don't even know you're doing where it's like, okay, let me check my watch. Let me go find my clipboard. Where did I set it down? What was next? Okay, that's next. And instead, these text reminders kind of like modern day are pinging me and saying 10 minutes till this. I also, just to give people an example so that if you're thinking about like, would this be a good fit for me? I set up text reminders about 10 minutes before each vendor arrives. That helps me so that if I'm, helping the cake baker find her location and set up, if I know the florist is about to be here, I kind of keep my head on a swivel and I'm saying, okay, they're supposed to be here. And I then will recognize, hey, it's been a little while. Where are they? So I set up text reminders for that. And again, it's just that nice reminder. And with text reminders too, to kind of show, as Eddie and I keep talking about how you'll save time and you aren't doing tedious things, I want to make sure we're giving some examples. One of them is if I set up text reminders 2 weeks out from this wedding day, and I'm setting them up because I want the bridal party to get a text an hour before they're supposed to arrive at their locations, which I should plug, it shares the address, it shares so much more information, and groomsmen love it. But if I'm setting all those up and then the week of, we have to make some changes, I
Mm.
don't have to go back into the text reminders and then edit all of those. It all is based off of like if I set them up for 10 minutes before or 30 minutes before, they will
Yeah.
always be sent out no matter what the time was updated on the actual timeline. So I hope if you're just listening to this and you can't see me doing it, you understand
Yeah.
that there are so many tools and things that TG can do that also just minimizes you having to repeat a step 20 times. The best way to describe it is there's a lot of bulk editing options to just make your life easier. But yeah, text reminders is a crowd favorite. And I honestly couldn't recommend them more. People love them. I'll give one last thing and then I will hush. But I've walked into a bridal suite and I've sent out a text the morning of. I do this fun thing that a lot of our planners have taken from me, but I send out a text that says, hey, arrive in the bridal suite at this time. And I'll usually include the things that the makeup artist wants, like come with a clean face, have dry hair, please drink a lot of water and eat food today. And then I always include the Spotify playlist that I created. And
Mm.
when they get that text, they're able to actually click on it because you can do like a URL in your timeline items. And so they can click on it in this text. And to wrap that up, what happened is I walked into this bridal suite and I could hear music going. And I think it was the maid of honor or someone came over and she was like, that was so cool. I got a text on my way here, told me where I
Wow.
needed to go. It had this playlist. So when we got here and someone said, like, turn on music, I was like, hey, the planner, she sent us a playlist. So
Wow.
they turned that on. And then you can kind of hear the mumblings. And it was conversations like, my planner didn't do that. And like, how cool was that? And it's little, those are minor, but they're not in the grand scheme of things when you turn around and you realize they all aren't going to forget that. And the next wedding they do, they'll remember that playlist, or they might remember me when they get married and say, that planner was so cool. I want to work with her. So I share that because just because we say you can have text reminders, when you get on calls with us, when you meet our team, when you start working with other TG users and stuff, you're going to learn that you can do the bare minimum of timelines in here and have a successful timeline experience. But we also teach you and show you how you can do so many other cool things that really just make you stand out. So that's my spiel on text reminders.
Amazing, Brooke. I love those anecdotes. And that's exactly what I can never give other than just hearing from you and other,
Yeah.
amazing planners that, and since we're on the subject of features, and I knew this time was going to fly. You and I could do this all day. And I know you've got a sick kiddo whose birthday it is and you got to go. I'll let you go soon, but I just got to tell people about the checklist features because
Yes.
we've talked this whole time, and we haven't even mentioned what I think is arguably the biggest feature release that we've done in the last few years, which is the checklist feature. Now, it's beyond the scope of this, chat here for me to go super deep, but I just want people to know for all of these years that I've been doing TG, the last 11 years, like we've just been focused on the wedding day timeline because we knew how important the wedding day timeline was, how much time, how much of a pain point, and we wanted to crush this problem. And I think we can spike the ball. We've done it, right?
No.
And you only do that when you focus, right? If we were doing 5 or 6 other different tools, we wouldn't have been able to build this Rolls-Royce solution for the wedding day timeline. Now, it was with a lot of thought and deliberation that we as a team decided that we would now build a Rolls-Royce checklist tool. But that's what we ultimately decided to do. And when I say checklist, just in case the terminology is like fuzzy, it's the overall planning checklist, 12 months out, 10 months out, 11 months, like all the way up to the actual event day, and maybe even some post event, like that checklist. And I want you to know this, as we record this, it's in beta. You're going to be hearing a lot more, but basically the key realization that I think greenlighted this project was the checklist is just a timeline, and timelines are what we do. It's a timeline that just spans a multi-month period rather than a day, but all of the same things where you're creating tasks and maybe you want to embed images, and you want to have tailored versions of the checklist PDF with your logo, one for the DJ, one for the, your client. You want to invite people to access a web-based version. You want to set reminders via email, probably rather than text. Like all of this rich functionality that you've seen, and it really matches up with like the UI for the timeline. So you're not even going to have to really learn a new interface. We're bringing that to bear for checklists. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts here, Brooke. Obviously, we're running a little over, but your sort of thoughts and energy, excitement, around the checklist feature set too.
Yeah, so the checklist, Eddie's right. It took a lot of thought. Niching down is huge for Timeline Genius. We share that with everyone because just like everyone else should do for their own businesses, when you focus on one target market or one item, you can really knock it out of the park. And we have. And then with that, it's allowed us to then step back and go to our users and say, how else can we help you in the timeline capacity and in the event execution capacity? And over time, we started to realize that the checklist was one of the things that popped up the most. And also we, especially myself, for so long when I was planning, I relied on a checklist so much. And there's that collaboration part, and there's all of these things that Timeline Genius has tools for, like collaborating, editing, bulk editing, all these things. And we just realized that it's exactly what Timeline Genius needs. I helped create the first checklist that you'll see if you go in and you use beta. I helped create what that one is. And then Eddie and the team have made ways so that people are going to be able to create their own checklists and create things that are not necessarily a wedding checklist. And I am just so excited for it. not just for me, not just for the company as a whole, because I imagine we're going to get more people to sign up and stuff, but also one thing that people should know about Timeline Genius is we are constantly asking for feedback, constantly. We are always saying, even if you've been a long time user or maybe you cancel your subscription, we are the first to say, can you just tell us why? What could we do better? And we're actually listening. We have a whole thing on the back end that we are filling out and sharing with our team, because it basically turns into a, what should we create next? What are people asking for? And the checklist became one of those things where we realized it's the perfect fit. It's what people want. And honestly, like, and now that we've released it in beta, I've realized that it is such a part of the timeline.
Yeah.
You just can't, like, people will ask me all the time, like, Brooke, what do I start with? Like, do I just create a timeline right away? And
Yeah.
now we're able to say, hey, you know what? Start a checklist, start
Yeah.
checking off those items. And this goes straight back to that professionalism part. No matter how long you've been in the industry, there's not, while we all take courses and there are incredible certifications, I've taken one and loved it, there's not really a one fits all handbook in this industry. So a lot of times we're relying on what we think is best, what we learned from someone else, or just based on experience. When you're able to use something like the Timeline Genius checklist, you have that confidence that thousands of other planners are also using that checklist. So you know it's reliable, that it's professional, you know that it's been tested and looked at. And with that, I always tell people there's something that when you're investing in TG, you're also investing in the ability to kind of get rid of that imposter syndrome and that worry of like, is my timeline right? Or is my checklist, does it have everything? And you can kind of step back and go, yeah, like I'm using a product that thousands of other wedding planners are using. So sure, duh, like this is professional. I mean, you can get rid of all the worry because now you know you're investing in a product that is worth it. And so with the checklist, that's exactly what this is. We've spent hours trying to figure out what should be on this checklist and who should be tagged in things and how it should go out and how it should look and how it should be used. And you're going to get, when you sign up for TG and the checklist option, you are going to get a product that you can feel confident in and that's going to make your life, from the minute you book them all the way to like 2 weeks after when you're offboarding them, feel very confident and comfortable in what you do. So I'm very excited about it. It's just incredible. And I probably know too much since I've worked on it on the back end, but I just know that it's going to be a game changer for a lot of people.
Brooke, I just to kind of why yeah, I'm so excited as well. Like it's a total, you know, what's funny? I'm sure you've heard me say this, but like in the early years of TG, so many planners, a question they would say is like, when you say timeline, do you mean the day of timeline or the overall project
Yeah.
planning timeline, i.e.
Right.
checklist? And I mean, that was such a signal like that, like, wait, it's both. Like these two things are like, you know,
Right.
flip sides of a coin that go hand in hand together. So I'm really excited that we're covering that base and giving that value to
Right.
people as we kind of wind things down here. And hopefully at this point, people, you've heard enough to know that, like, if you haven't seen Timeline Genius, get on Brooke's, you know, email Brooke at
Yep.
timelinegenius.com, set up a call with her,
Yep.
you know, go to timelinegenius.com and start a free trial.
Oh
It's
yeah.
free. There's no credit card. You have nothing to lose. Just go to timelinegenius.com, start a free trial, and just see how it works.
Right.
Okay.
And
But
I can, so if people sign up for a free trial, I also, now that we're saying all this out loud, I'm like, why am I not charging? But I
yeah,
also do calls where if you're just ready to get going, I will sit and screen share with you and help you create your first timeline. So if you sign up for the free trial and you're like, I just want to sit down with Brooke, I don't even want to try and teach myself this, I totally get it. Message me, get on my calendar, whatever we need to do, but I will actually get on and walk with you and enter your vendors and fill it out. And I basically will show you what I do. And then you can decide, like, is that the best for your business? And those are really productive calls. So that, like Eddie said, like that's number one, get a free trial, 14 days. It's absolutely free. We don't even take your credit card. And so you're not locked into anything. And then we'll get on a call. We'll create your first timeline, and you're going to call me in 2 months and be like, what was I doing? For, all that time. The other thing that I hear from people when they come to Timeline Genius all the time is I'll see posts or something and someone will say like, oh, I looked up Timeline Genius and it just wasn't a good fit for me. And I am an outgoing person, so I'll ask them or I'll comment back and be like, oh, cool. When did you? And people will be like, oh, back in like 2019, I checked out Timeline Genius.
Yeah.
If that is you, and that is totally fine, please know that we have added so many new features. We have so many things, like in little tiny things that make a big difference and also big things. And then I also sometimes have people that'll be like, hey, Brooke, I wish this system could do this. They've been with us for 2 years. And I'm like, it can. We added that last year. And you guys are busy, so I won't call anyone out, but you're busy. So sometimes you don't pay attention to the emails, the announcements, and all the things we send. And so why I want to make sure I plug this at the end is if you're listening and you're like, I've tried TG, I did a free trial a year ago or 2 years ago, or for some people 4, I'm constantly getting people coming back and saying, wow, you added all the things that I wanted back then. So if that's you, maybe think about giving it another shot. I would love to chat with you. And also, if it's still not a good fit for you, let us know why. Come to our website. We have a button that you can say like request a feature. Let us know why it's not a good fit for you right now. All of that information is what makes us better. And people sharing with us all along, like, hey, we want a checklist and hey, we want this, is how I get to leverage me wanting something and make Eddie create it.
I love it.
Just
So
kidding. But it is when I
It
have
is kind of true.
everything back. Yeah, like if I can say 10 planners have asked for it, then our team is way more likely to pull that one to the top of the list. So that's my shameless plug on all that.
I almost want to say, Brooke, and this probably doesn't even sound like appropriate, but like, I don't want to even hear that, like, I don't have the time to learn the news. First of all, I have talked to multiple people. I think of Chrissy Thomas, Southern Sparkle. Like she told me flat out, she said, Eddie, I'm going to tell you. She's like, I put off learning TG because I just thought it was going to be this thing, this undertaking. And she's like, it was so much easier than I thought. Like one thing I really will say, full honesty, is like, it's a really intuitive, easy to use software. They should still get to know you. It's very intuitive,
You have to fill out this form to get to the next page, to then get to the editing, which you all know how to do. The biggest difference is just you quickly have to learn where the buttons are and which ones are going to benefit you. But it really does walk you through it. And if you're like, I'm not tech savvy, that's what we're here for, because we've learned it. And so go to our Instagram, look at our reels. I mean, I record videos daily. They're under 2 minutes. And it is just, here's how you do something. Here's how you do something. We are here to ramp you up on it. But again, it is so easy because it truly walks you through it. It's like press generate, edit, send timeline. It's very, very easy to catch on.
Every planner I talked to in the early days, Brooke, there were a lot of different things that I heard, some people would say differently, but every planner I talked to, they said, Eddie, it needs to be really customizable and it needs to be easy to use. And I think we've really hit both of those marks. One last question for you, Brooke, before we kind of wind things down. I knew we'd run over here, and I'm
That's okay.
Totally with that. We've talked about so many benefits, features, and dynamics, and with respect to the platform. If you had to sum up or just point to like your number one benefit, not just as a TG user, but also having seen all the people that have gotten onboarded, like how would you articulate like the number one sort of benefit of using Timeline Genius?
Gosh, organization is the first thing that pops into my mind constantly in the past year, 2 years, especially after 2020. The number one thing we hear people say is, I need more streamlined processes. I need to be more organized. I need to make sure that my business on the back end is just really easy to operate so that I can focus on in-person things. And when I think of TG, the level of organization and the ability to keep everything in one spot, to have all of your contacts, to have your Rolodex, for things to just auto-populate into certain areas where I only have to fill it out one time. All of that, the organization and the simplicity of how things continue to operate, I really think is what stands out to me. And that might sound very minor, but it truly does come down to that. There are so many incredible processes and tools and things that TG can do, and you've heard us talk about those. But at the end of the day, what I needed for my business was something that's going to help me stay organized and feel confident and kind of be professional to my clients, to make it easy for them to access. Like, we don't make them log in or anything. They won't even do it if you try. We make it so easy for them to use the software and stuff, to where organization and just simplicity and streamlining your processes, that's the biggest thing that I think it does and what stands out to me.
I love that. I think for me, where I'll just kind of, and if you want to chime in with more stuff, by
Yeah.
all means, I kind of feel like just kind of bringing it full circle for me, like there's so much that has gone into this venture, bringing it back again. I still remember the very, very start of this and the roots of all of this. And it's so gratifying because I feel like we're not done and the software is still getting better. Lord knows it is, but like we've reached this point where I'm like, kind of like what planners say when they get that hug at the end of the event, like that, oh my God, I couldn't have done this without you. Like the number of times that we've gotten that feedback from planners that's like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm getting emotional. You've changed my life. Like for
Yep.
me, that's the oxygen that I need to breathe to keep doing this. And I just want people to know, like, that's what it all started from. For me, and some of my friends, like they were like, do you mean what you're saying? I'm like, hell yeah, I mean what I'm saying. And what I was saying is like, we're on earth to help other people, like without getting to my spiritual and meditation practices. And, I believe like for me, Timeline Genius is 11 years of my life. If I live 100 years and if I stopped working today, that's 10% of my life. That means something to me. That means a lot to me. It's literally my life.
Yeah.
All I've done with my waking hours, and I don't turn it off on the weekends. I don't turn it off on the nights. All I've done is like, how do I build this to serve? And I feel like our heart has always been in that place and it's always pulled us through the inevitable, really hard challenges. And it's not just me. Like there are, I think, and I speak to this sometimes, I just want people to know there is an amazing team.
Mhm.
Our programmer, Svetlana, who was upended from her home in the Ukraine when all the craziness, I'm not going to go. I mean, people that like, our designer, Christy, the best designer I've ever worked with in my life, you, Hemming, like just the whole team, the people on the back end, and Logan for our social media, and Riley, who's supporting like just amazing, beautiful, talented, just incredible people. And all we do, and this is why I'm like, you have to at least try it and better yet, take advantage of it, because this whole team of people, all we're doing day in and day out is thinking, how can we make this awesome for the wedding planners that are using this, right? Like, how can we make this amazing? So like, I guess I would just leave it on that note, like this beautiful yin yang dance of us serving you and you telling us how to serve you better.
Yep.
It's this beautiful cosmic thing. And,
I
yeah.
couldn't agree more. To give you all a little bit of perspective on that, Eddie. So I am in charge of our sales here at Timeline Genius, and Eddie has given me a lot of freedom and flexibility in that role to make it what it is. But the biggest thing that I learned when I got here and when I started working with people is I really don't feel like I have to sell to people. I get on and I build relationships, and I get on and I meet you as a planner and I learn about your business. And like I've said before, the software sells itself. And that has been something that as someone on this side where I am working with, planners and wanting them to sign up for Timeline Genius and wanting them to pay us so that I get paid, I've realized though that the longevity of staying here and the knowing what the future of TG is, and just the kind of the people that you all get when you work with us are here because we actually have so much heart in for this. We actually care so much about the planners that, I mean, even in sales meetings, it's not how many people can we get to sign up today? It's how can we make this software the best? And then in turn, that means that everyone will want to sign up for it. But it's always how can we make it fix the problem or make a planner's life easier? And I, as someone who's a planner and a member of the TG team, I recognize that as being something that you don't see it. I don't see that at other companies. And I work with a lot of companies. So you just don't see it.
Yeah, there's something
Love
really
that
special
about
about it. Yeah, there's a real love, a real passion for everybody on our
Nice.
team. That like it's this every line of code, every image that's designed, like there's every word that's written in an email, like there's like a love that's gone, like a real passion
Right.
oriented towards service that's gone into it. So again, just to recap, I'll tell people go to tomlinegs.com, start a free trial. Tell them one more time, Brooke, how they can get on your calendar, get in touch with you.
Yep. You can go to our website and you can book a tour with me, or you can just email me, brooke@timelinegenius.com, and I would be happy to set up a call with you and chat further.
And to all of our podcast listeners, thank you. To all of our Timeline Genius customers, everybody that's given us testimonials and referred friends and given us the candid, constructive feedback when there's something that's not right. Like, we love you all, and we are so, so grateful. I have no words to express the gratitude for everybody that's played a part in this journey. So we hope to support you, and thanks for listening. And Brooke, thank you for coming on. I'm so glad you encouraged me to do this episode. This was fun.
Letting me do it. I felt like we needed to share with all of our podcast listeners that a little bit more behind the scenes of TG, and I think we were able to do that today.